So prior to ammonia, we used to scrape bird poo off islands to get fertiliser.
Guano. Hello, welcome. Budgie Gamalwara here from the Gadigal lands in Sydney. It's time for the Startup 360 show. I'm Simon Thompson, editor of StartupDaily.net.
And I'm Angela Campbell, CEO of Fish Burners.
Yay! And my fabulous co-host. Great to have you here. How's your week been?
It's been good. As I think I said earlier, I've lived like 5 lifetimes between now and Monday, but it's been great. It's been good.
You don't waste a second of it, do you? Lots to talk about this week. 2 amazing guests. Let's go straight to that first. Who have we got on today's show?
We've got James Bradley, who is the founder of Facet Amtech.
Exciting news this week. Just come out of the CSIRO on accelerator, and that's going to be a bit of a theme for today, science and deep tech. And now he's off to Tech 23, the Cicada Innovations Summit
great.
Next month. I think it's next month, yes.
Coming up soon, yeah.
And I know there are discount tickets for it this week too, so check it out if you're keen to go and have a look. 23 startups will be involved. It's always a fantastic and inspiring day. And to follow on for 10X...
Tanil Air, who is the executive manager of the On Innovation Program at CSIRO.
Yeah, she's really cool chick.
Yeah.
So we're keeping our cool chick theme
Cool
going
chick.
here. But before we go any further, I do want to say that Startup 360 is supported by Vanta, helping startups unlock all opportunities through automated compliance. Thank you to Vanta and the team. Now, this show, of course, is all about more founder fun, founder mode, what makes founders tick. We dive into their stories, and we've got a couple of great stories this week. But in terms of things and news that's been around the place, I'm going to start with the budget. New South Wales one, because it was kind of funny. There was dueling budgets. Queensland was announcing their budget at the same time New South Wales was on Tuesday. They're spending up in Queensland, I think, $1.2 billion on digitising the government. So fair investment on sort of, throwing out a few fax machines and maybe installing email. I don't know. But the New South Wales budget, I know on Sunday night I got the embargoed release from our Minister, Anilak Chantavong, announcing $80 million for startups, which I have to say, given we had budget cuts in the first budget, then we got a couple of mil, nothing really in the second one. And I know a little bit of money for the Sydney Startup Hub at that point in time. This one was a little bit more positive. But I have to say, looking through the budget, and, there are papers all over the place, and you really have to love going through the fine print, because what I found in there was $5 million for the City Startup Hub move. That, of course, the Minister announced in December last year. But it kind of represents the funding allocation that they've given to Tech Central, which is their big thing, their big showcase, and they're very proud of the investment there. It represents about 16 or 17% of that $38.5 million worth of funding for Tech Central. So it's not a lot of money overall, and I did write a piece which probably went off a little bit, pointing out that there are things like the focus which came out of the Innovation Blueprint is very much on energy and housing. And so there's a $4 million fund for have the Housing Innovation Network and Innovation in Construction Fund. As I said, though, that's about a 4-bedroom house on Sydney's North Shore. There is $6 million for the Minimum Viable Product Ventures program. That's been ongoing for a long time. Startups can get about $50,000 for that. There is another $4 million for women and Western Sydney to support tech founder diversity by providing training for female founders and our future tech leaders. I'm glad there's something there, but I'm still disappointed that we don't have the $10 million Colours and Patty fund to invest in female founders that was going to be there under the former coalition government, especially when I look at WA, which is putting together an investment fund. South Australia, in their budget a couple of weeks ago, announced a new $50 million investment fund, VC fund, that they're putting together.
That's awesome.
So there are these state governments everywhere who keep putting serious cash on the table for the sector. New South Wales kind of, I'm sorry, it's feeding the chooks. And you can just smile at me because I'm just going to say that I'm disappointed.
I think there's work to be done, I think, to continue to fuel, the New South Wales ecosystem. I think Sydney alone is 65% of the total worth of the sector. And I really want to make sure that we're continuing to fill that pipeline and I guess even in the ecosystem ourselves, that we're advocating for that money to be able to go to founders. Again, it's great that we have lots of incentives going around, particularly for female founders. We'd love to be able to see, making sure, as we spoke about last week, making sure that we're setting people up to be successful, having, money where they really need it. So I look forward to see where it's getting allocated to specifically.
And this is where I want to talk about the pro rata aspect of it, because, 80 million on its own does sound like a fair bit of money. But as I point out, South Australian budget, which included the $50 million for the government-backed VC fund, $28 million for an AI program, $5 million a year for a research and innovation fund. South Australia's share of Australian GDP is 5.6%. The New South Wales economy is 5 times that at 30.7%. So, if you were to ratio up the money that South Australia spent into an equivalent spend in New South Wales, we would be topping $250,000 more.
Yeah.
So 400 million, sorry, is what I'm going to say.
Yep.
400 million it should be,
Absolutely.
which I think should be about right. That's where New South Wales should be spending on this sector if we're taking it seriously. So I'm sorry, but Treasurer Daniel Mookhey, Minister Chandivong, Premier Chris Minns, pull your fingers out, step up, because this is not good enough for the sector. There's this other thing that they're doing. They've got this new panel that is going to clear the path for $1 billion projects in the state. They're talking about 30 all up that they're going to be able to help fast track, and but they're going to have to be worth $1 billion. And then, of course, the interesting thing is that they had NextDC boss Craig Scroggie, who only a couple of weeks ago announced $2 billion for a big project down in Melbourne, and AirTrunk's Carly Wishart, of course, that company sold for $20 billion to private equity a year or so ago. It's all about data centres.
Yes.
Which, yes, are important, and then I get why the energy thing sort of marries in with that, but it's not particularly imaginative, and I'm pretty sure the private market can sort this shit out without governments needing to intervene, especially when you look at Amazon's announcement that it was going to spend $20 billion on data centres in Sydney and Melbourne. Maybe they got the heads up and they know that they're all going to get money sprinkled on it because, struggling companies like Amazon, I mean, poor old Jeff.
What would they do?
Have a great wedding, mate. Hope it's a lot of fun. Did you get an invite to Jeff's wedding?
I think it's still coming with them.
Oh, okay,
Got lost
yeah.
in the mail.
Mine got lost too, so never mind.
Maybe the next one.
But a lot going on in this space, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with this streamlining of $1 billion projects, which, as I go, is like a football stadium in the city. So that's you measure everything in swimming pools. In Sydney, you measure things in football stadiums and how much they cost to build. But speaking of $1 billion. New Zealand, how good are the Kiwi startup founders? Halter, congratulations.
So exciting.
To them, $1.5 billion valuation on a new raise of $155 million, Series D. Blackbird's in there again. Mary Meeker was doing her bit with, of course, her VC fund Bond in the US. Bessemer, New Zealand's Icehouse Ventures, all of these existing backers. I call this the Fitbit for cows. It's kind of wild. You wear this. The company's called Halter, so you wear a neck halter, whether you're beef cattle or dairy cattle.
Yep.
And amongst the things it does is it virtually fences the animals so you can keep them away from water courses. And to understand the importance and the impact in New Zealand, dairy is its biggest export sector nowadays. It's not sheep. Everyone still makes sheep jokes, but it's all about dairy cattle in that country now. And of course, people are worried about the environment and the waterways. And so being able to virtually ring fence the cattle with the stock with this collar, which kind of gives them a little bit of a buzz and a little bit of warning and trains them to sort of stay in a certain place. It's quite amazing, the technology. It's become very important. They're hoping to roll it out in Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia, but they need regulations updated to permit virtual fencing. We're still sort of doing the analogue version of it at this point in time.
Hours and hours.
We're digitising fencing, but it has been working in Queensland and Tasmania, where amazingly a quarter of the dairy industry down in Tassie is now using the halter product.
Fantastic.
So spectacular. Congrats to everyone involved in that one. An amazing story. Craig Piggott founded it in 2016 when he was just 22 with the support of his former boss, Peter Beck from Rocket Lab. Cracking story.
I love all ag tech stories. I just love the innovation that goes on and the application, the rollout that it always has. It's just fantastic.
I have a total soft spot for the ag tech ones too. Now, the other one that, speaking of founders, is of course Toby Thomas-Smith from Kiki. We talked about it last week, shutting down in New York because of regulations. Guess what?
Surprise, surprise!
He's moving to London. He's going to do it in a fourth location and hopefully have a little bit more luck over there. If you're unaware, it's a subletting app or site group, invitation only. What you do is he's now having coffees with people in England.
I did see that.
I thought the first premise should be having tea in England.
Missed opportunity.
Coffee is not that good in the UK. But so yeah, Toby, learn to drink tea as you meet all your potential people. I think in New York in 12 months they got about 700 matches, a little over 700 matches. He's hoping that he's an enormously enthusiastic chap. He thinks it's going to be a huge success in London, but had a crack in New Zealand, shut it down, had a crack in Sydney, shut it down, had a crack in New York twice and shut it down. So I'm saying fourth time lucky, but maybe it's fifth.
Maybe it's fifth, 4.5.
But I also know the numbers around that business from the $9.5 million they raised. Not sure how much the tickets are, but there can't be too much money left in the bank account at this point in time. And of course, they've got a $6,500 US lease on a site in New York that's going to run for another year and a half. They're hoping someone's going to backfill for them and cover that cost. So maybe he has an application where he could sort of pivot into sort of matching companies with sites, so that when you have an unused lease, you could sort of
that would be great.
Have coffee with someone and put them in it.
Put them in the thing.
All right. Well, in just a second, we'll be right back with James to talk deep tech. Don't go away. Welcome back to Startup 360. I'm Simon Thompson with Magella Campbell and our first guest, James Bradley from Facet Amtech. James,
G'day.
Welcome. Great to have you in. We're going to talk ammonia, and I'm going to kick off with that because what I know about ammonia is that's why I pee on my lemon tree, because it's good for plants. Is that how you get it? You just sort of get all the pee together and extract it, or is there another method?
Well, there is a whole urea plant that comes after ammonia that ostensibly is doing that. So no, ammonia is the second most produced chemical on the planet.
Wow.
Ostensibly used currently for food. Mm-hmm. And so kind of the vibe is that if we didn't have large-scale ammonia production, about half of us wouldn't exist. So prior to ammonia, we used to scrape bird poo off islands to get fertiliser.
Guano.
Yep. And so, Orica, who make ammonia for blowing things up, not for, that's the other use case.
Yep.
But, a typical ammonia plant makes 1,000 tonne of ammonia a day. And so, and there's many of those around the world. So it's a huge industry. It's also
1,000 tonnes a day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, they're looking at building new plants now at like 1.2 million tonne a year.
But when it comes to energy intensity, it's kind of like data centre hold my beer.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's up aluminium smelter level.
So for every tonne of ammonia is about 2.5 tonne of CO2.
Oh my gosh.
It's like 1% of the...
Yeah, 2% of the global emissions come from ammonia production.
More countries, yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, it's
which is more than
dirty
planes.
secrets.
Yeah.
And we worry about
more
planes.
than whole countries. Like it's insane.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you're up to with Facet.
Yeah, so myself and co-founder Pete have kind of kicked off with this, and we've employed Jessica Merce, who's our lab person, who is helping us scale the production of the catalyst. And so interestingly, it was originally an accidental discovery. So Peter's a materials scientist. He was making materials for sort of crazy applications, high wear and high temperature, yada, yada, yada. And when you're looking at materials under microscopes and whatever have you, you often cut them in half. and you'll do that with a wet saw. And he got one wet and went, oh, what's that smell? And so he was making ammonia at room temperature just with water and ambient air. And
Wow.
that's not really meant to happen, right? So normally ammonia is made at super high temperatures and high pressures with a whole horrible process.
So this is like a Marie Curie moment.
Almost.
I
Yep.
was going to say like penicillin moment. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where it all started. And so we've built the world's first ammonia reactor that feeds air, just plain old air, and
A
water.
giant saw.
And feeds that through a reactor, and we get some ammonia out the back end of that. And so we've proven that that's a thing. And now the next sort of 6 months is about turning up the wick and working out the economics of it all and how well we can make it work.
Blown
But
away.
yeah, it could be a pretty good thing.
Yeah, I just had visions after that initial description. There's going to be a big giant saw going around and around, chopping stuff in half, and you just collect the ammonia off it.
Yeah, just
But
collect
that's
it in the
my
air.
brain,
Yeah.
Yours is more scientific.
It's so impressive. I want to take a step back.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how this is a huge, very scientific, innovative, technical, sort of role that you're in at the moment and
Yep.
building something really, really innovative. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, interesting, my background. So I often used to say I have two halves to my life. So I spent the first half of my life in big box retail, running around managing Big W stores. That kind of came to an end, and I went and did a engineering degree in my early 30s. And then sort of came out of that and went and worked for, it probably was a startup, right? And we just didn't call ourselves that. So a consulting firm that had an app that we used to sell into mining. And so sort of ran around with the hard rock guys over in WA, and then a whole bunch of the coal guys over here in New South Wales.
Digitising them.
Helping them look after their gear digitally, rather than Excel spreadsheets. And then got this sort of thing in my head that I wanted to go and do a PhD. And so I went back to the university and started a PhD, and then very quickly worked out that's a bad way to have 3 kids and a wife, because you don't get paid very much to do a PhD, and I kind of couldn't get the balance right. And so...
And you'd like to keep the wife and 3 kids too.
Yeah, it turns out, yeah. And so, for a bucket list tick. And so ended up taking up a role at the university as kind of the design engineer in engineering, which is a pretty fun gig, to be fair. And so I helped all the researchers build whatever wild ideas they were having on the day. So it was a very eclectic sort of engineering role.
And this is at University of Newcastle.
At University of Newcastle, sorry, yeah. And that's where I got tangled up with Joss Kesby doing his PhD on small or micro wind turbines. And in the really early, he sort of finished his PhD and he'd designed the world's most efficient small wind turbine, which was cool. And he was like, oh, what do I do with this? And he found a program run by CSIRO, which is a nice segue into your next guest. And he applied for it, and they came back and said, oh, you need a team. And so I still remember Joss coming to my door at my office and going, hey, I've applied for this program, it's run by the CSIRO. You need a team. Do you want to be on the team? And I was like, yeah. And there started the third half of my life. And so we kind of spun that technology out of, bad pun, but we spun that technology out of Newcastle University. It came to its demise sort of largely caused by COVID about 18 months ago. And in the interim did a whole bunch of work, and that's where we met Simon at the accelerator that Newcastle run.
I2N.
I2N. And so I kind of spent 3 years with them towards the end of Diffuse Energy as we were kind of winding down. I was doing that as a little side hustle and kind of helped, was sort of a small part of building that program. That's been good fun. And then now kind of found out what Pete was up to, and I knew that existed prior, and here we are.
So it's a combination of science, and then you bring the engineering of how the hell are we going to make this work in a practical way?
Yeah, I'm kind of the nuts and bolts guy who goes, geez, how are we going to do that?
Yep. How do we get the electricity into the light bulb?
Yeah. And so, and I really enjoy doing things that aren't meant to be able to be done. So I've been kind of lucky. I got, on the early days of MGA Thermal, I was working with Eric as a researcher. There's a conveyor belt new conveyors that's been spun out of the University of Newcastle. I kind of got on the early days of that as a research project while I was at uni. Then diffuse energy, and then now this. So I've kind of tripped into this weird place in the world where that's where I've ended up playing, which is kind of cool.
And now you end up on Startup 360. So
and here we are.
You go.
Yeah, right.
And actually, I have to say congratulations. This week, you're going to be part of CSIRO Innovations, the Innovation Hub, their Tech 23 program.
Yeah,
so
that's
you'll be presenting on stage about what you're up to now.
Yep. So either Pete and I will scissor paper rock for that one, but I reckon I'll send Pete to that one. Yeah.
Well, you have to come along and cheer him on. Anyway, it's definitely a great day. And some really inspiring stories from 23 amazing startups in deep tech.
Yeah, so we did that as diffuse energy back in the day, so it was really good. Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah. Was it you, that one?
Nah, who did that one? I think Josh did that one.
There you go. So maybe it's your turn. You never know.
No.
Round two.
I'll give Pete his time in the sun.
My go. So, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not an engineer and I have very little understanding, but I'm guessing that wind turbines and catalytic, what are they called? Catalytic reactors, at the opposite ends of your engineering scale, would it not be?
Yeah, they don't have much of an overlap, to be fair.
So how do you make that transition? Like, I mean, is there any particular, like...
I think, like, for me, I've kind of got a good systems brain. And so I just turn everything into a system, to be honest. And so it kind of doesn't matter what it is. I just go and learn. And I like learning new stuff. So to be fair, asked me 8 months ago how to make ammonia, or we've been trying to track back to year 10 chemistry. Yep. And so, it's a kind of a fun journey to go and learn a whole bunch of new stuff and then try and beat everybody else at it. Got a lot of work to do, but it's exciting.
Yeah, it used to be... a certain island off the coast of Australia in the Pacific where we sort of put people in detention for immigration. That used to be its main income. Nowadays, it's a client state of the Australian government. But yes, it was bird poo was where they got the ammonia from and how they made money. Mate, I want to ask, you talked about diffuse energy. There is that tough moment where you have to make a decision, and I want to talk to you about that because it kind of, I had this vision, it's a little bit like, being with a family member and deciding to turn off the life support system. Take us through that process, because it's tough and hard, and it's not that the idea is bad, there are a whole bunch of factors at play. Take us through the experience of making the decision to shut down diffuse energy.
Yeah, so it was kind of the final nail in the coffin for us was the fact that during COVID, semiconductors became a real problem. Disappeared. Yeah. And we'd before COVID, all you did is you looked at a component and said, oh yeah, they've guaranteed 7 years life, I'm good to go. And off you went. Post-COVID, no one does that anymore because we learned a couple of lessons. So we had a family of gear that had no other component match, which is pretty rare in sort of MOSFETs, in the MOSFET world. Mm-hmm. And so it went off market for 2 years. So I had a pretty good overlap with electric vehicles, and it turns out Mr. Toyota has a little bit more buying power than Mr. Bradley, and so they just never got onto the market. So that was the final nail in the coffin. When you can't build product, it makes it pretty hard to run a business. So the decision, probably Joss made the decision before I did. I kind of tried to hold on to it for a bit longer than he did. And Joss and I are great mates still, so he was probably right, to be fair. I probably held on to it too long. I totally
get that experience too.
Right. And so
it's still right.
Yeah. And so there was this, I kind of put it down to, there was this visceral moment one day where I was cleaning up, where I opened a wheelie bin and I put roughly $450,000 worth of R&D in the wheelie bin and closed the lid in and pushed it out onto the street for the garbage truck to come pick it up. So that's a pretty, that work was my work. So I'd spent 2.5 years sort of on this journey of it was around our controller, getting all of that right with a bunch of people helping us. But yeah, you got to go throw that out, just chuck it, right? Wow. So that's not the most fun moment in your life, but kind of is what it is.
It's a little bit different to burning old love letters.
Yeah. So that's one half of it. And then the other half is, as I said earlier, that no one writes books about shutting a business down. And so you're a director. As founders, you're the director, in Joss's case, you're the CEO, and it's also his research. And so you're kind of the father figure in 3 different ways. And to do it properly, and you've got investors, and so you've got all this cash in the bank, how do you pack all this up in a nice way and keep everyone as happy as you can? So that's a tough gig to get right. And it turns out you can't just stuff this, slam the door and walk away and go do something else. There's a whole process.
Some do, but it's your own moral compass at this point in time.
If you want to be able to sit at a bar and have a beer with someone one day, you probably need to do it the right way.
Yep.
And so we chose to try and do it the right way, but that's actually a fair bit of work. And doing the work on a startup is easy because, well, it's hard, but there's like this nice North Star you're running at. When you're working hard to run into a black hole, you're like, oh, God, I don't know why are we doing all this crap. It's really, that was probably actually the harder part than throwing all the R&D in the bin.
Yeah.
But yeah, got it done.
The life admin of a business.
Yeah. And so, Joss will, if you talk to Joss, he'd do it again. We'll always say we'll do it again, but we'll do it a lot differently next time.
Yeah.
So you do learn a lot.
Well, I hope it comes back because it was a bloody good idea. And the weird thing is, if you have a look at going back to Mr. Toyota, if you have a look at a whole lot of cars from that period, a lot of them don't have things like the driver alert warnings on the side of the car because they ran out of chips for that as well. So there are little components in cars from the 2022, 23, and I think even the 24 period that just are missing pieces of technology because they didn't have the chips for it.
Yeah, or they went back to the old instrument clusters because they couldn't put a digital cluster in. There's all sorts of weird things that happen. Yeah,
nuances.
Everyone was ad-libbing at that point in time. That's a tough one. So, getting back on the horse.
Yeah.
How did that feel? And did you have to have this internal conversation with yourself and say to the wife and kids, that last thing I did that caused immense emotional pain in me and the family, I think I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, it's funny. My kids have got no idea what I do. I think they're quite confused. Like they know, but they're like, it's so different to all their peers. And thankfully, my wife just kind of lets me run my own race. She's very good. So, Kerry, well done, thank you.
Yep. Big shout out to Kerry.
Big shout out to Kerry. So, yeah, she just trusts that it'll all kind of work out in the end. So I've got a little bit of pressure to make it all work out in the end. But no, so I think I was ready to go again, and I don't know that I could go work for big corporate or go work in a big. I'd bounce around the room and drive everyone insane. I think I've kind of gotten used to this freedom. Yeah, so I was kind of ready, and then the timing was really good. Pete turned up right at the right moment, so here we are.
There you go.
Yeah.
Meant to happen.
Yeah.
What's different second time round building? What lessons are you carrying across from the last?
Yeah, it's that whole triage of what matters. And so well, the first time you do it, you think everything's critical because you kind of don't have a line on, if I don't do this today, the world ends. You think everything's going to end. So you're continually stressed about what you haven't done. This time I'm like, it doesn't matter. That can wait. Or actually, we need to do this today because that really matters. So I think you don't realise how empowering that is, like there's that certainty of what you need to do. And then you're already in the ecosystem. And it turns out the ecosystem's pretty good. And so now I know all the people I can just jump on the phone and go, hey, I need a thing. Remember that thing you did for me last time? So, the first time you spent ages trying to find the right accounting people, the right lawyer, the right
anything
creative, the right whatever, and this time you're like, oh, I've already worked all those people out. So that makes life heaps easier. Absolutely. You're not shopping around as much. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the importance of universities in projects like this, because I look at what David's doing at UNSW with founders there. I look at Murray at UTS Startups. Of course, Macquarie Uni's got an accelerator program. And then Richard with I2N up in Newcastle. It seems like it's a really important part of the flywheel of startups, especially in the tech space. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we've gotten a lot better at it, right? So if you went back a decade, almost none of this existed. And so universities got a really hard gig. So universities are meant to be the best teachers in the world for students. They're meant to be the best researchers. Those two things don't necessarily match up. They're meant to support the local community. Like, they're meant to do all this stuff all at once and be the best at it. So they've got a hard gig to kind of do. And then from a research perspective, everyone wants, it's almost like politics, right? Like, we want research in 3 years to hit the ground running and do good things for the world.
I need a ribbon to cut.
Yeah, right. And so it's getting tougher to do fundamental research that you don't know what the impact's going to be.
And the accidental research, like the story of ammonia.
So, you know, and this is a perfect case in point, right? So you're doing research on a new material type that was thought to be good for other things, and then you just accidentally work out it's really good for something else. That might be pretty important one day. And I'm sure the physicists that came up with semiconductors didn't quite realise what they were doing. Like, if none of us had our laptops these days, we'd be not real happy. But I think, to your original, universities are there to support the ecosystem around them, and big businesses tend to like shed employees and put new employees on. I heard a thing once, they're kind of like a deciduous tree. Like, they lose some leaves and then they grow some leaves back, but over time they're just a big deciduous tree. Startups are a new sapling, right? And so they've got the potential to turn into a big tree and employ lots and lots and lots of people. And I think the recognition of that has kind of come to the fore now.
Does that make the universities the ammonia of this process then?
Potentially.
All right.
Yeah. And ditto for the CSIRO program, just trying to build frameworks around really good ideas so that we can try and bring them to market is obviously pretty important, because historically Australia hasn't, we've been excellent researchers for a very long time, but our ability to, like, if you compare us to, say, the US, where universities punch companies out all the time, we hadn't been very good at that. And so I think we're doing some pretty good work now.
But I do want to just explore that idea, because, again, going to the political pressure, there's a sense more that universities are meant to be a bit more like a TAFE now, so that, you know, the intellectual property is meant to become a trade of some sort. And there's that sense that they want a practical outcome, when often science is random, unexpected, you know, not necessarily takes you down. It is startup mindset science.
Yep.
It's like, you know, I think I'm going to go down this path, see what happens, but the whole thing might blow up literally and we'll go nowhere with it. That part of universities maintaining that, and especially around commercial constraints, seems to me to be a big challenge.
Yeah, and the IP thing is something else we're getting better at. And so universities generate lots of IP, right? That's kind of what they're doing. And some of that IP's got commercial potential. And then how do you actually get that out into the world? You should get Joss here one day. So Joss is now the tech transfer officer for Newcastle University. So he's gone full circle now, where, you know, he started off in an argument with them and now he's the guy on the other side of the fence.
Poacher to gamekeeper.
Kind of funny. But if I take Newcastle as an example, the framework that we went through 6 years ago to try and take technology out of the university versus what we've just done with Facet, the first time was horrendous. This time was actually really good, and probably, you know, we had that signed, sealed and delivered in probably 6 months, which by comparison to many other frameworks around the place is lightning fast.
Yeah.
And everyone's happy with the outcome. So I don't think anyone's disappointed. And so it worked quite well. And I think that, yeah, there's been some really good work sort of behind the scenes to make that able to happen.
You spoke a little bit before about, the university's roles in actually supporting the ecosystem and helping startups, and you yourself have done coaching of a lot of the Newcastle spin-offs. Would love to know, what's the most common blind spot you see in technical founders, when they're turning, lab IP into a commercial success?
Yeah, the fact that you can have customers, which is like hilarious, right? And so certainly for research-based founders, like you got to go talk to a customer. Sorry, a who? And I want
Leave
you
me
to go,
alone.
and I want you to go talk to heaps of them. They're like, they're not going to understand. Like it's kind of always the same rhetoric, and so it's kind of getting them across that chasm to have a very different kind of conversation, because people who are always talking technical things start talking their own language, and then I need you to go talk to the everyman, so to speak, and they're like, oh, I can't do that. Well, you're going to have to. So it's probably just because you've made something that's really good doesn't mean that anyone else cares or wants to buy it. And so that customer validation is probably the first initial blind spot, as silly as that sounds.
So, CSIRO on,
Yep.
and we'll talk to Neil about it in a minute. What's it like, that moment when you're in a room with a whole bunch of scientists looking at each other, and you're second rodeo, but for many of them, it's their first crack. Is there a first day at school sort of excitement and terror in the experience?
Yeah, probably more terror for most people. That's another interesting one, right? And so, gone from wind turbines to ammonia, so those two networks also don't overlap particularly well. And so, we've managed to talk very broadly across the global ecosystem of ammonia in the past sort of 3 or 4 months at pretty senior levels. And that's because you just know that you can just go ask and do it now, whereas the first time in, you're like, I can't talk to the head of sustainability for company B, like they're not going to talk to me. Whereas now you're like, I'll just email the CEO and see if I can have a chat. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, you don't get bent out of shape. So I think that's another one, just the ability the imposter syndrome's gone. You can shake that imposter syndrome off and just get on with it. Yeah.
I feel like the rules, you just kind of start realising there's no rules. Like you kind of just do whatever you want.
Yeah. Bring it home.
Absolutely. So my final question is, after Amtech goes wildly successful, what if you were going to do your third stint as a founder? What deep tech thing would you do?
Wow. 3 kids, 3 startups. Makes sense.
Yeah. This might be. If this one goes really, really well, it's going to take a lot of work, right? And so, I mentioned before, the Orica plant does 1,000 tonne a day. We're at, milligrams. And so I asked this question in a conference the other day, there's 12 orders of magnitude there. So that's a really, really big number that we have to multiply what we're doing by. And so we're going to, even if we do that in steps of multiplying it by 1,000, it's several steps, and they're big, difficult steps. So it's going to take a few years. I'll just go retire and enjoy life and go kite surfing, I think.
You can go and do it with Bill Tye, and you'll get the money for your next startup.
I'll say that, and then some cool idea will come up. But anyway, we'll see. I certainly would have told you mid-wind turbines that I'd be playing with ammonia, so who knows.
Stay tuned, I guess.
He might go back and do the wind turbines again with the money, and hopefully the semiconductors he needs to do it. James Bradley, great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
for
so much.
joining us. Enjoy Tech 23.
Will do.
And either on the stage or in the audience.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Tanil from the CSIRO on Accelerator program to talk 10X.
Let's go. Welcome back to Startup 360. We are joined with Tanil Ayer, Executive Manager of CSIRO on program. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to kick off with, so tell us about On.
Sure, I'm very glad to, and thanks for having us. The CSIRO On program is really about supporting how we get Australia's incredible publicly funded research out into the real world and making real world impact. So we run a series of programs to help research teams take that idea, test it out with customers in the market, and find out if there is a real product market fit and have they really solved a problem that exists out in the real world, and hopefully in some cases create a company or a startup from that, or explore what other avenues they have to create impact out in the world. So really privileged to
Now you've just done your 9th cohort, and I think it's been more than 80 startups formed
Yes.
out of it in the process.
Yes.
It's an amazing project, and I was lucky enough to talk to them last year about storytelling, a room full of scientists, which I did find a little bit awe-inspiring but also intimidating because, you know,
Absolutely.
my wisdom is about this, and there is a lot of big brains in
Yeah.
the room. But
And
It's very sobering.
that's right. And if you ever want to feel imposter syndrome, know that you're walking into the room where you are absolutely not the smartest person there. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a scientist. And so, yeah, I feel that every day. But at the same time, it's really awe-inspiring and really grounding that you get to see these incredible minds and humans that are out there doing great stuff.
So are you ready to 10x our 10 rapid-fire questions? Take it away, Magella.
I want to ask an easy one, but what do you love most about your job?
The people. It's a really easy answer. I've always done work where I support and empower others, and this program, that's exactly what it's here for, is to support and empower these amazing researchers that are doing literally world-changing things, and we just get to help them. We play a small part in that journey of getting them out in the real world and making, you know, incredible change. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a community more amazing than the community that surrounds On. They give their time freely and willingly, often for free, the people that coach and support these teams. And yeah, everyone's so incredibly passionate about what they do. You've seen it. So you walk away from events face-to-face where you get to catch up and see these people, and yeah, it just fills your cup.
I love that. I
Yeah.
feel that to my core.
I want to ask, is science and entrepreneurship a happy marriage?
I think it needs to be. I think for our future as a country and as a nation, and for us to be innovative, they absolutely have to come together. Whether it's entrepreneurship through the traditional pathway of a startup or through all the other ways of creating impact from science, and whether that's through the research translation pathways of joint venture or a social enterprise or licensing. There are other ways to create impact from research other than just the startup pathway. But absolutely, we need to keep investing in research. We need to keep investing in science and technology so that we remain ahead of the curve as a nation.
That's awesome. So you're not a researcher, but you are trained in design and change management. How has that sort of shaped the way that you're re-engineering research culture?
We take a very human-centric approach to how we design the program. We're very considerate about the experience that people have in the program, but also making sure that we meet their current needs and requirements. The system and the ecosystem changes all the time. The teams that come in have different sort of thematic and science domains that alter year on year, and so we have to constantly change the content and the way we interact with each cohort. And so really it's very focused on what their experience is, but what's success for them and what's success for our program. And success for our program is, again, helping those incredible brains do what they do best and take that out into the real world. They're literally saving lives, they're changing their own lives, and they're taking a completely new trajectory, and we need to help them in the kindest, most resourceful way we can to help them on that quite literal life-changing journey, as I'm sure you heard from James.
I've got a deep tech startup that's created some magic wands. I'm now at the magic viable product. I'm handing it over to you to test. What are you going to wave it at to change and fix?
So we have a couple of programs. So we went through the last round for On Accelerate. They are teams that are venture ready, but we also have an On Prime program that supports the researcher earlier on in that journey to help them validate whether or not that tech is actually solving a problem in the market. So help them through the path of customer discovery and market validation. Have conversations with real people out in the real world. Make sure that it's solving a problem out there, and is there someone that's going to pay or buy the thing that they've created? And if that's where they've gotten to and the startup is the path, or you want to create a startup, then the On Accelerate program is the one that's really supporting the venture-ready technology and ideas on that journey to get out of the lab, create that company, have an incredible team around them, support infrastructure. And that's where they usually get really challenged on how viable is that tech? Is it scalable? Can they take it to market? What's the prototypes they need to build and develop? And we help them work through all of those steps along the way.
I like what James said before when we were talking about, and he's talking about it with the uni students and what's going on at the accelerator there, but I think it's the same here. It's you've got to go and talk to customers.
Absolutely. I think it's, for the research community, it's a really hard mindset to change, because they're usually really heads down, heads in the books, in the lab, doing the testing, and then we say, go out and have 100 conversations with someone, and they just sit there and it blows their brain. But you get them at conversation 50 or 80, and it's incredibly inspiring to see the insight that they've gained from that, and they're like, oh, if you'd told me this at the start, I wouldn't have believed you, but I've been able to have these conversations, and this is a real problem, and we're going to change lives, and that's the really exciting stuff.
That's pretty epic.
I love that. Generally speaking, when people speak to founders, you say pick a problem and solve it. But for research, it's usually the opposite, right? You have a solution first, and you're trying to find, I guess, a market for that. How do you sort of help founders, take that alternative path and be successful while doing that?
Yeah, so that usually we try and have that kind of conversation with them back in the On Prime program when they're really still quite early on, and hopefully help them hold their solution lightly, but actually fall in love with the problem. We have that conversation, and you hear us say it sort of on repeat in the program, is love the problem, find the problem and fall in love with that, and then see how your solution helps with that. So that's a shift for them. But again, when they're having those conversations, they start to see that it's not about pitching their technology, it's not about selling it, it's about having a human one-on-one conversation and understanding what are your challenges and whether or not maybe their solution will solve that. So yeah, again, it's a transformative process and a journey, but I don't think you'll probably have anyone that walks away from it regretting the time they spent having those conversations. Yeah.
What's the general perception about scientists that really annoys you? I can just imagine you're out about having a beer, barbecue, and someone says something. I'm probably neurospicy myself, but I think the scientists are incredibly curious people at heart, and so they're going to ask questions and they're going to query what's going on, but they're also incredibly proud. They've spent quite often their lifetime researching this topic or this particular challenge, and so naturally they're going to be incredibly passionate and excited to share that with you. So I just think lean in. Have a conversation with them. I think I've made lifelong friends from the researchers in the community. Yeah, everyone's a bit different, everyone's a bit quirky, but everybody is in their own way. So I think embrace it, lean in. Well, Magella's halfway to a PhD on ammonia after the conversation we had with James earlier.
I'm very well versed in the topic now. So if I were to give you $5 million now to spend it on any way that you like to support deep tech founders, what are you doing with the money?
I think we've got an incredible opportunity in the market at the moment. There's great funding to support research translation. I think I'd invest it in supporting more programs like On. We can't do this alone. It's a bigger challenge than we can do ourselves, and so it's great that there are all these other accelerators around. But we've also got a challenging environment for our tech transfer community, and for those that aren't in that process of trying to spin out technology from their research. The tech transfer and the commercialisation teams are the ones that are helping them get it out of their institution, and so they're often the ones helping them identify what that pathway might be. But there's usually only a couple of people per university helping thousands of researchers and thousands of projects, and that ratio isn't right. So I think finding a way to help bolster that support infrastructure to help that research translation pathway, because it's a bit of a choke point. And I think they do incredibly hard work. It's really challenging, and we do our part to try and help those teams be as ready as possible for the tech transfer to pick them up and carry them forward. But I think that would be where I would put those funds, yeah.
Maybe you've just answered this question, but we've got Australia's science ministers at state and federal level all in the room together. Tim Ayres probably has $5 million drop in cash in the bottom drawer that he can pull out and do that. What are you going to say to them? You've got 5 minutes to pitch. What's the message going to be?
Well, we've got another couple of years left in our current round of funding, and so I would be making the pitch about the incredible impact the program of ON has had. So, like you mentioned, we've had over 80 spin-out companies, and we've got an excellent survival rate for the companies that have started through ON. We've had over 1,500 teams, over 8,000 people come through the program, which is, we're reaching sort of the 20% mark of the total research community nationally, and investing in a program like ON to continue that legacy and that research translation mandate, because it's a national imperative. We have to keep investing in this space. If we want to see our investment in research and R&D in Australia, we need to continue helping that research make its way to market as well, so people can see that when they're making the investment here, the outcomes are coming out the other side. And programs like ON are, incredibly supportive communities, networks, and I hope, add great value to this ecosystem and keep that trajectory moving forward.
It's another one I think we'll just clip up and send straight to the offices, shall we? Hey, Minister, watch this.
No comment. Sorry.
Sure, I will. It's on. It's happening.
Please.
Matt, I need this clipped up, okay? We'll fire it out this afternoon. Well, check your inbox, Mr. Ayres.
Coming to you hot. What do you expect to see in the next 10 years in terms of research in Australia?
It's interesting that we're starting to see, even today, a real uplift in sort of med tech and biotech, and I think that's because of policy interventions 5, 10, 15 years ago. So we've had the National Reconstruction Fund, and you're going to see an uptick, and we're starting to see that uptick in manufacturing capability. But I think a big one's obviously going to be quantum and AI. Like they're the big potential growth, high potential growth areas in the research space. But obviously deep tech in its nature has a long timeline. So the intervention might be happening today, but it will take a little while for some of those outcomes to start to be seen out in the market. And so we're starting to see the shift around quantum. We've got some really great teams that have gone through ON that are out in the world. We've had some great AI teams. But I also think additional to than just the spin-out pathway is that you're going to see an amplification of the other research translation pathways. And our program evolves all the time, and we're evolving to try and make sure we're meeting that need as well, is that not every path is a spin-out. And I think as well, the humanities, arts and social sciences sector is going to start engaging with programs like ON more, because they're starting to see that actually there is potential for their research in those areas. It's just that the traditional language of come and do an accelerator to create a company isn't something that lands with people from that space. And so we're trying to reframe how we can engage with that community, because there's incredible talent and amazing things happening in that space, but they're potentially not getting the same support because it doesn't get the same visibility as the physical sciences do. And so how we can help them there. So I think you'll see those shifts in a few different key domains down the line.
I want to pick up on part of the conversation we had with James, and that's, of course, Diffuse Energy went through the program and subsequently shut down. A bunch of factors, including the semiconductors. So out of all these incredible ideas you've seen come through the door over the years, is there one that, you would will back to life that you think we desperately need, but circumstances, the stars didn't align in that moment?
I think hopefully we help the teams on the journey through the program figure out what's the right path for them. And so, like I mentioned, we have a really good survival rate for our teams. So I'm not sure actually I'd be able to list off, other than Diffuse, I'm not sure I'd be able to list off the top of my head.
Bring it back.
Yeah, that's right, who hasn't survived. But I think we've been incredibly lucky in the scenario of Diffuse, in that while that company didn't proceed, the team members stayed in the ecosystem and continuing to give back, and that cycle of give back is incredible. So James has come back around. He's gone full circle. He went through with Diffuse. He then supported the Newcastle ecosystem through facilitation and coaching and the broader network that he had there, to supporting someone else, identifying that actually there's an incredible opportunity. I want to come back with that. So I think it's less about, getting something that was on life support back out there. Is it a pivot, or is it actually something different that needs to meet the market need? Because companies fail for lots of different reasons. But hopefully we help the teams build that resilience and that insight to protect them against that longer term.
Cool.
Is it the last question, or?
Well,
I never count.
I'm not counting properly either, and I think but you started, so let's just keep going anyway. We can add GST to 10x, and it can be 11.
The tax question.
Yeah.
Please no.
What would you tell a founder who's thinking about going into the ON program but isn't sure? What do you want them to know?
Well, they're probably not a founder yet.
That's true.
They're probably someone with research, and they just think they've potentially got something, and they really just need to test that. They've probably been working on this for the better part of a decade, and there's an opportunity really to try and validate, is there a commercial application for that technology, and what might that look like? And that's where On Prime really have a team, get some people around you, because there's a few calls you'll need to make. And it's really great to sort of divide that across your team and come and join On Prime. And we do a couple of intakes for On Prime throughout the year. Whereas if they've done something like On Prime and they've validated that there's a real problem out there and that their technology is going to meet it, then something like On Accelerate, if they're going down that new venture startup pathway, is ready to support them. We're hoping to evolve our program to help some of those other pathways. If they're not thinking just new venture, they're thinking the others, and how we might help teams through that. I think the other things they should be thinking about are how they can access other federally funded programs like the Australia's Economic Accelerator. There's some incredible money out there that's available to them to really get them to that next stage, and joining that with something like On and having that experience and putting those two things together, their momentum and their trajectory is going to be significantly accelerated. And that's, I think just lean in. It's not an easy path, but if you're passionate about it and you really want to make some incredible change in the world, then do it.
Because the startups that have been involved through On, I think, have gone on to raise more than 330 million, or access more than 330 million in commercialisation grants, which is an astonishing figure.
Yeah, and I think over 350 mil in investment capital, so over 750 mil total. And that's just the numbers we know about and the numbers we can see. It's really hard to track and monitor that for 1,500 teams. We're investing in ways to try and capture that better, but that's just what we know of, and we know we're fairly sure that it's even more than that, but they're the ones we can verify.
Tanil, great to have you on the show.
Thanks
for joining us on 10X at Startup 360.
Thanks for having me.
Well, another week. Days are getting longer, which is pretty exciting. And I did mention the Startup Daily Best in Tech Awards. You've got one more week to enter. Entries close on July 4, so get them in. You have to tell the guys. I want to see them. And we have a Chief Technical Officer award in there too. So get the CTO one. All those clever people should be part of the entries for this year. So do that. Head to startupdaily.net for all the details. Well, that is all we have time for this week on Startup 360. The show is a Pinstripe Media production. Thanks to the incredible Sharkies fan, Matt Jackson, who edits and, of course, produces the show. Appreciate it, even if it is through the tears of a Sharkies loss. Thanks to Ella Walsh, James Vass and Vander for their support. The Sharkies are going to come good. I know they're going to come good. It's going to happen. And as an ex-Manly supporter, at least I know your love. So enjoy that. Do subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or of course YouTube. Don't forget to read startupdaily.net and subscribe. It's absolutely free. No paywall. It's all there. Everything you need to know. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you next Friday. Bye for now.